All right. Okay. We're done talking about whatever you guys were just talking about. To start us off, we're going to watch a video on Henry Hudson, the guy we talked about yesterday, who was the first one to discover the Hudson Bay and stuff, and it was named after him. And he was also the one who his crew had a mutiny against him, and they left him in what is present-day New York and, went about their lives. So we're going to watch a video on him first, and then we will continue reading. Dun, dun. Come on, you can do it, computer. It's so slow. Henry Hudson. There we go. All right. Hi, Zoe. All right. Let me share my screen. Oh, dang it. Okay, stop yelling when it's double right now, buddy. It's just not very helpful to yell. All right, Henry Hudson. All right, Eric, you may hit one of the lights. Friends here, you're going to have to listen to my Chromebook. So if you need to scoot closer to here, you can, but it's too long of a video to have it playing double. So you might have to scoot closer to me. Okay?
Why can't you, post it for them and then for us and have them watch it separately?
That would work too, but we're already here.
Sure you want to go that way? Dear Tim and Moby, I've heard the Hudson River was named after some guy called Henry Hudson. Who was he? Thanks, Olive. Henry Hudson was the greatest explorer who never found what he was looking for. He was born in England sometime in the late 1500s. Back then, before planes or trains, people traded goods by boat. Traveling by sea could take forever, especially if you were going all the way to Asia. Silks and spices were worth their weight in gold, and the Far East was the only place to get them. Many people set sail to find these items during the Age of Exploration. This was a period when European explorers searched for trade routes, land, and riches. Reaching Asia by sea was cheaper and safer than the old Silk Road route. But many explorers believed there had to be a faster route than going all the way around Africa. So they turned their eyes west. They knew that since the Earth was round, if they sailed far enough west, they'd hit China. Right, in 1492, Christopher Columbus ran into a teeny tiny little problem with that plan. But the promise of a faster route to Asia didn't die there. More than 100 years after Columbus, Henry Hudson was determined to find a way. Between 1607 and 1610, he led 4 voyages to try and find it. Everything we know about Henry Hudson's life comes from the journals he kept during those voyages. Nope, we don't know when he was born, or much else about him. That portrait of him? An artist made that up. We have no idea what he looked like. Well, let's just keep showing him how everyone else does. In 1607, Hudson convinced some English merchants to pay for a voyage to Asia. His idea was that he could get there by sailing north through the Arctic Ocean. Nope, they hadn't even reached the Arctic Ocean before icy conditions forced them to turn back. But Hudson convinced the same group of merchants to pay for a second mission. They made it a lot farther this time, but there was just too much sea ice. After this failure, Hudson lost his English backers. He turned to England's biggest trading competitor, the Dutch. Specifically, the Dutch East India Company, the largest company in the world at that time. They agreed to finance his third voyage and gave Hudson a ship called the Half Moon. But as they were sailing through the Arctic, you guessed it, ice. This time, Hudson hit upon a new plan. Instead of sailing northeast, they would go northwest.
Moist, please.
See, back then, most of North America hadn't been mapped by Europeans. Many thought there must be a waterway leading all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They called this mythical route the Northwest Passage. Hudson's new plan was to be the first explorer to find it. He led his crew down the American coast, sailing into the mouth of a river. The Mohican people who lived nearby called it the Mahicanatuck River. Today, it's known as the Hudson River. This time, he was sure he'd found the way. Hudson didn't discover the river. The Mohican knew it well, and other Europeans had been there before. But Hudson was the first European to sail as far as he did. Still, about 150 miles in, the water grew too shallow to continue.
No, because Mrs. Big was just down there.
When Hudson returned to Europe, England's King James I made him an offer. Leave the Dutch East India Company and find the Northwest Passage for England. Hudson agreed and set out on his fourth voyage in 1610. Seeking another entrance to the Northwest Passage, he followed an inlet into northern Canada. In July, they reached a huge body of water, now known as Hudson Bay. They spent months mapping the coastline, but couldn't find a way west. And then winter set in. Hudson Bay filled up with ice, blocking the way out. The crew was forced to drop anchor and stay for the season. Many of them blamed Hudson for their predicament. It took until the following June for the ice on the bay to melt, and by then the crew was starving. Some were convinced that Hudson had a secret stash of food. So, even though they were heading home, the crew mutinied, rebelling against their captain. They forced Hudson, and those still loyal to him, onto a small boat. None of them were ever seen again. Okay, so Henry Hudson never found his way to Asia. And wasn't even the first European to find the Hudson River, or most of the other bodies of water that carry his name. But his third expedition brought the Dutch to the New World. They settled along the Hudson River and founded New York. England started colonies along the East Coast. These eventually became the United States. Later on, they used Hudson's last voyage as a basis to claim land in Canada. Today, Henry Hudson's name can be found on schools, bridges, towns, and waterways. In fact, there's more water named for Henry Hudson than for any other person in history. If you really want to.
Funny. Love me some Tim and Moby. They just crack me up. So, anyways, there's just a little bit more knowledge about some Henry Hudson in case you were ever so very curious about Henry Hudson. So yeah, that's like really interesting that even though his crew like left him to die, literally, he and was never seen again. There's more water named after him, like waterways, than any other person in the world. That's super interesting. So we are going to continue on with which one? We are on page 14 and 15, I believe. Let me 14 and 15, which is Explorers at a Glance. Yes. If you don't have your magazine at home, no big deal. I'm going to post it on my computer if my computer decides to load, which it probably won't. Oh, here it is. Woo! It's working. All right. So remember, the goal of what we've been doing in social studies this week is to give us the background knowledge to set us up to really be able to get into early settlers when we get back. So we're giving you all the background knowledge about how people came to America. So we've learned lots about all the different people and the timelines that came about. Remember, our original timeline or our original date was in 1441. We ended our timeline yesterday in 1621, I think. In 1620, which was, 179 years. of explorers. So we're just going to do a little bit more about explorers today. So explorers at a glance. Dun, da, da, da. All right. Europeans had soon mapped, charted, and claimed much of the world. So literally, like, they've been there, they claimed it for themselves. Remember, when people like got there first, or, you know, in some places, like when people came here and they claimed land, even though Native Americans had it, if they got there first or could overpower other people, it was their land. They just, yes, this is ours, we claim it. Nations would never again be unaware of what lie beyond the horizon. So now, where we're at in time, much of the world has been explored. So there's not much guessing on, you know, what's across the ocean, because people have now traveled the oceans and got to the other side of the oceans and have found out what is there. Instead of great differences between one place and another slowly began to fade away. The age of exploration may have ended, but pioneers, colonies, settlements, and global trade were just getting started. From that point, the fortunes and futures of people all over the world were forever tied together. So, the age of exploration, that is that chunk of time, that 179, around 200 years of when people spent exploring. They were in their original spots. People sponsored that. Well, you know, the rich people, the kings and queens sponsored them to go and explore, to voyage, and to find what is out there. Everything has now been found. So now that everything's been found is when the pioneers, the colonies, and the settlements. So this is when people leave one place to go to another place. And also global trade. Global trade is when things are being traded, not just countries right next to each other, but across the globe. Remember, different and new places have new and different resources. So then people from, you know, Europe originally want those things that were now in, that people had now found in America. So exploration's over. And now we are in, well, when we get back, that's what we're going to be focusing on. The pioneers, the settlements, and the colonies. So that's what we'll really be focusing on. So this is just a fun map for you to read and to look at. And this one, it goes by what happens first. So first it was Columbus in 1492. Then it said Cabot. And then it said the B guy that I can never say his name. And it's just showing you how they traveled and some dates of it is all. So we can watch this. And the finished one is in your magazine. But right now it is showing us where people went about. So this M guy, remember, he was trying to travel around the entire world. So he started in Spain, went all the way down to South Africa, came there, and came back around to here. Remember, he died before he made it all the way around, but that's besides the point. Yeah, he was very close. But then he died. Poor guy. And then Henry Hudson's the last one, and look at all his blue.
That's a lot of blue. That's more blue than red.
So those are just different explorers, and that doesn't mean these are the only explorers in the world, but these were the ones that made significant voyages, and their stuff has been charted. So, fun little map. And then it also says, each voyage faced its own hardships, which we know. You had to risk your lives. There was things like pirates. There was things like sickness. They didn't have enough food. All those things. So each voyage faced its own hardships. From illness to treachery to bloody battles with native people, explorers faced very real danger. The lure of great rewards, however, drove them forward. This ambition for wealth and power, along with the belief that European society led to the cruel treatment of many native people. Remember, we talked about this in the very beginning. They wanted all the wealth they could. They wanted as much land as they could. So even though it was dangerous to explore, they were going to do it. And all the Europeans coming to present-day America is what really hurt native people, because native people who lived in present-day America, what their lands were taken a lot of. This, we're not going to read this whole thing, but it's basically saying that voyages itself wasn't only dangerous, but also when explorers got home could also be dangerous. People that were jealous of them, that they were the ones sailing and stuff, that they were the ones being explored and sponsored, would sometimes try to, kill them or get rid of them so that they could be the one to do that. So they also had to face dangers of home, of people wanting their spot, essentially. It's a very graphic picture. Not my favorite, but that's okay. European nations often put a single ruler in charge of a territory. Governors or viceroys were appointed by monarchs and often had complete control over an area. Assemblies and other systems of representation developed only as colonies grew. The more Europeans lived in an area, the more they demanded to take part in the new government. So as Europeans settled, there would be a monarch from back in England that would be like, oh, Sir John Thomas, John's name, Sir John Thomas, you are going to be in charge of this whole land. And that's just how it was for a long time. But then as more and more people came, they wanted to be like, why can't we make a decision? Why can't we make a decision? So, things just weren't always fair. So here's some little information on how long journeys took. So Columbus's journey across the Atlantic took 2 months and 9 days. So that's about 69 days. The length of the entire voyage from start to finish, not just across the Atlantic, but the entire thing was 7 months and 12 days. The Magellan, remember, he's the one that tried to go around the entire world. Did he make it? No, he ended up dying. So before his death, he was on it for 1 year, 7 months, and 7 days. But the length of the whole thing, the global exploration was 2 years, 11 months, and 19 days. I'm super curious, does any one person start and finish? Or did or was the original crew, was any of the original crew left after that 2 years, 11 months, and 19 days? That'd be a long time to be on a boat.
No.
So super curious. I have no idea, but I'm just curious. Then this V guy, he was the orange one in our last thing. His total voyage was 1 year, 2 months, and 19 days. And then Ponce de Leon, the length of his voyage from Puerto Rico to Florida was less than a month, which makes sense because it's not the farthest trip. But remember, they were kind of going at how did their ships move? By the wind. It's not like they had motors to make their boats go faster, so they were at the mercy of the winds. All right, and then here's just a teeny bit of learn more. So this says, most Spanish explorers and settlers paid little attention to the rights of the native peoples, which means when they got there and the people native to where they were landing, they just didn't care about, okay? They didn't care that they were actual people. They didn't care that they already had land and families and stuff. And instead, they usually enslaved them. Some Europeans spoke against these injustices. Bartolomé de las Casas, I don't know, was a Spanish historian and a Dominican priest. Eric, I'm past that. It does not matter what his name is. We all saw it. Mrs. Knifel's not amazing with names from different cultures. I apologize. His experiences in the New World led him to return to Spain and press for better treatment of indigenous people, which is another name for native people. He made his case to Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. Eventually, he convinced King Charles to sign the new laws. These laws ordered that enslaved native people would be freed after 1 generation. So he wasn't giving up the enslavement of people, this king. He said after 1 generation. So if someone was enslaved, once they had their children, then that generation, the new generation would be there, then they would be not enslaved anymore. But so this Bartholomew, or whatever his name is, the Dominican priest, who saw that it was not right, that the Spanish explorers just found people and were like, yes, you must be enslaved to me. So he obviously was, had a good conscience and had empathy for others. All right. And then our last little section of the lovely magazine is, I'm trying to think. We probably have time to finish this today. Then we won't have to have social studies tomorrow. So a changing world. Obviously, from the beginning of this magazine till the end of this magazine, the world is changing, right? It was a 200-year span of people exploring and finding the new world. And now, once everyone has found the new world, you know, people are living in different places and things are about to change. All right, so a changing world. The legacy the explorers left behind was more than just one conquest. The movement of peoples between continents changed world cultures and ecosystems or networks of living things. So think about an ecosystem. We learned about ecosystems during the first 9 weeks. If, you know, animals from Spain or from Europe, or bugs or pests or diseases, when people came from there to here, they brought all those things with them, which changed the ecosystem. You know, people from Spain brought probably foods they liked to native, you know, to Northwest or to North America. So then cultures are changing. All different things are changing because as new people come in, things change. That'd be like if Mrs. Kneifel, if Mrs. Kneifel left and there was a new teacher tomorrow, wouldn't there be a different way of going about things in the classroom? It's a similar thing like that. Things change as new people come and stuff like that. So this culture and biological exchange is known as the Columbian Exchange. Plants and livestock from one part of the world began to flourish on the other side of the globe. In more ways than one, the world would never be the same. That's another thing when you think about change. Once change starts, you can't really stop it necessarily. That'd be like if today someone decided that there could be no more iPhones. Like, would that happen? No, there's iPhones all over the entire world. The change happened to get iPhones, and it's never turned back. So, Christopher Columbus introduced sugarcane into Cuba on his second and third voyage. So he brought something new to Cuba. Cuba became Spain's primary source of sugar in later centuries. Vast sugar plantations in the Caribbean relied on the use of slave labor. Sugar made the Caribbean islands an important stop on slave trade route. You are making an extreme amount of noise, sir. Okay. Sugar made the Caribbean islands an important stop on the slave trade route. Even today, sugar is still grown in North and South America. So, you know, the butterfly effect, something happens which leads to another thing, which leads to another thing. Because Christopher Columbus introduced sugarcane to Cuba, and Cuba started growing it, which is great. You know, they're growing sugarcane, but because of all that sugarcane, they needed slaves. So now people had to be enslaved in Cuba to get the work done, all because Christopher Columbus introduced sugarcane. But now there aren't slaves doing the sugarcane, and it's still being grown today. Fun facts. Land claims in the 17th century. So these are different people who own different land during the 17th century. So the red is the British, the green is the French, the Dutch owns just this tiny little brown part right here. The yellow is Portuguese, Russia owns all this, and Spain owns all the yellow. So Spain, what?
We have Swedish on ours.
Oh, you have Swedish on yours? Well, lucky you.
It's like
Why don't I have that?
It's in the.
Oh, yeah. Then red is Swedish, which if you have your magazine out, it's there, but it's not on this one. It's like right here, which is very tiny. So it looks like the British, the French, and the Spanish own the majority of land during the 17th century. The other ones are a little bit smaller. So today, most areas that were once claimed by European explorers have gained their independence and become strong nations of their own. The effects of European influence, however, can still be seen. So even from things from the 17th century, which we are now in the 21st century, we can still see influences from all those centuries ago. Culture, religion, ethnicities, and languages across the Americas still strongly reflect the European nations that seized control over the land many years ago. So 4 centuries ago, 400 years ago, we are still seeing effects of it. There's still people and their culture here. We can read about some potatoes.
Ooh, potatoes.
Mrs. Kneifel loves a potato. I like potatoes in all forms. I like mashed potatoes. I like French fries. I like all potatoes, except for I don't like sweet potatoes. Fun fact. Not a fan. Not that this has anything to do with anything. But anyways, potatoes were a New World plant that flourished across Europe. Many European nations soon added potatoes to their diets. Some areas relied heavily on this crop for food. Ireland was one of these areas. From 1845 to 1849, a blight accidentally brought by America destroyed many potato crops. So that would just be like something that could hurt crops. It's a bug?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a bug. Destroyed many potato crops in northern Europe. About 1 million people died from the potato famine in Ireland alone. 2 million people left Ireland for the United States. So the New World, all these new people, they relied so much on the potato for food that literally 1 million people died because there wasn't enough potato, which meant there wasn't enough food because that was the food they were growing to eat. So 1 million people died, and then 2 million people also left that same place to go to America in hopes of having more food. Fun fact, the potato, I believe, is the only food that can be that you could just totally live off of. Like, it has enough vitamins and minerals that you could legitimately just live off a potato. Pretty sure I heard that. Don't quote me, but I think I heard that. Then we have this picture of a native person and their horse. Images of American Southwest often show wild horses and herds of cattle. Neither of these animals is native to North America, which you should know from when we learned about Native Americans. Does anyone remember who brought the horses? Eric? No, Europeans didn't bring horses. John? The Spanish brought horses in the 1500s. Because they brought all different types of stuff. Remember, we're talking about mixing cultures and all that. Neither of these animals is native to North America. The Spanish brought horses and cattle with them. Today, in places like the United States and Argentina, tens of millions of cattle are raised for the beef industry. Horses became important to many Native American tribes. They have been central to tribal tradition for hundreds of years. So, yeah. Remember, Native Americans didn't start out with cattle and horses. The Spanish brought them to them. Here's a picture. I'm assuming this is of smallpox, is what this illustration is trying to show us. Disease was probably the most effective and brutal conquistador of the New World. Remember, a conquistador means conqueror. So there you go. The one that conquered everything was the disease. Native Americans had no resistance to European diseases because they'd never been exposed to it. These included smallpox, measles, malaria, yellow fever, influenza, and chickenpox. The deadliest was smallpox. Estimates put its death toll in the Americas at nearly 90% of the population in some regions across the hemisphere. Whole villages disappeared. So just like how they brought horses, which ended up being a good thing to North America, people from other places brought new diseases that other people had never been introduced to. They had no immune system to it, so it wiped them out. 90% of the people dying, that would be like if there were 10 people, only one person lived. So that is a huge amount of people that died from smallpox and, other diseases as well. This looks like an alphabet. Not alphabet like we see today, but close. There's an A, a B. I'm assuming a D. Yeah, I don't really know. That's an R, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U. But then where's the rest? I don't know. Anyways, the oral traditions of Native American tribes were deeply rooted in their various cultures. Stories were told and passed down from one generation to the next. And we remember that, right? How they told stories. That was how they learned. Younger people learned from their grandparents the stories of history. They were not necessarily written down. Some stories included tales of creation and morality. Which means living forever, or afterlife, creation, how the world was created. Some outline codes of laws and histories of the people. Most tribes did not have a written language, and no tribes north of Mexico did. So some people in Mexico, tribes in Mexico had written languages, but anyone north of Mexico, so anyone in North or in Central America, North America, where we are, not Central America, sorry. North America, where we are, none of them had a written language. It was only verbal or oral. Europeans brought writing to these parts of America. This allowed the histories and cultures of the tribes passed down orally for thousands of years to finally be written down. So it literally could finally be written down because people from Europe brought written language, showed them how to write, showed them letters and things like that. So that's a positive that came, that Native Americans were able to actually write down their culture and stuff. So that's a plus.
That's pretty cool.
So fun. So obviously, hopefully over the past week, you have learned a great deal about how how other people found what we live in today, North America, that about 200-year span where people were on those voyages, where they were exploring and they were trying to find new land, which became the New World. And we live in what is now, or what was once considered the New World. And because people explored, a million changes happened. And then, so when we get back from Christmas break, we are going to get started with early settlements, and we're going to learn about the pioneers and learn about the colonies, and we're going to learn about all the people who left Europe and left Spain and all those places to come to where we are today. And, the main reasons that they had to do that. So that's what we're really going to focus on when we come back. Does anyone have any questions, my lovely, lovely friends? Questions, complaints, concerns? Ethan, do you have a question? No? Okay. So, reading RTI, don't leave if you're at home. Reading RTI is at 10:30. If you have, make sure you know what you're doing for reading RTI today. We have science at 12 o'clock. 11:55-ish is when I'm going to send out the Google Meet. Our guest from yesterday is going to be back again today for science, and we're going to review, throw it down. We're going to review food chains and food webs, producers and consumers and stuff from quarter one. We're going to play a game. So that's what we'll be doing with her this afternoon. Okay. And then later this afternoon at 1:20, we're going to do a spelling bees. If you would like to join spelling bee today, we have to find out who's going to be our person. So we have to do at least 2 spelling bees. If we have time, we'll do 3, and then we will know who's going to represent our class. So that's the plan for the rest of the day. You are free to leave me whenever you're ready to go. I'll post this recording, of course. If you have a question, now would be the time to ask. Yes, Zoe.
What time are we coming back?
At 11:55, I'm going to send you another link. But you have Reading RTI with Mrs. Aiko, so make sure you're looking for her emails. I don't think anyone here on my screen has work. I sent emails if anyone had any missing work. I don't know if any of you do. I don't know. But check your emails from me. Zoe, do you have another question? No? Okay. Any questions? If not, you're free to go. And I'll see you guys later. Bye. Bye.